So we are going to add a little bit to this application. Before we do so, there's one thing that I realized that we didn't do last time when we added students and teachers. We didn't go back to the house show page and display the teachers there. So for a particular house, any given house, it's showing the students, but not the teachers that are associated with that house. And so that's a simple fix. We can go to the house show view and make that display. So I will go to that exact file, app views houses. In here, I have access to the house already. I'm displaying the students. There's very little difference between students and houses. And so I'm going to grab this block of code that we use to display the students, and I'm going to put it right here. And then I can just find instances of the word students and change them to teachers. And that one, and I need to change student as well. 2 places or 3 places. Change teacher, and change it there, and change it there. And that should be enough because we already have the house object. So we're just displaying teachers in the house, and that'll be the house name. It'll go to the teachers collection that's associated with that house. If it's empty, it's going to say there are no teachers in this house. But if it's not empty, it will loop through the teachers, assigning each to a teacher block variable, and then displaying that teacher's name as a link to the teacher show page. So if I go back to here and reload, there we are. We have a teacher in this house. If I go to another house, there's a teacher in that house. If I go to another house, there we are. If I go to my seed script, I'm creating 1 or 2 teachers per house, and that's fine. Okay, so that was just a little thing that I wanted to fix up, and I will just capture that. Displaying associated teachers on the house show view now. So I'm going to just pull up the Rails guides, because what I want to build here is a many-to-many association. And so for that, we'll quickly just look at an example many-to-many that they have in the guides, in the Active Record Associations guide, and then we'll build effectively just a clone of what they have there. So there's 2 different ways of doing many-to-many associations in Rails. One is called has many through, and the other one's called has and belongs to many. And the difference between the 2 of them is if your join table contains any extra information. And so the example that they give here is that you have a physicians table with a physician model and a patients table with a patients model. And the join is appointments. So when a patient makes an appointment with a physician, an entry gets created in this appointments table. The appointments table has 2 foreign keys in it, one to refer to the physician in question, one to refer to the patient in question, and then it has an appointment date, which is like a separate bit of information. And so that's an example of a has many through, because we're going to create a 3rd model, an appointment model for the join. Now there's another situation that we might get into. I go a little bit further here, which is the has and belongs to many. You still have a situation where you have a join table, and this is like where the example they're giving us is maybe we're building a manufacturing facility, an app, and that there are assemblies and parts, and there's a many-to-many relationship between those, but there's no extra information to store. So we would just have a table that has 2 foreign keys in it and nothing else. And then we wouldn't need to ever access any of the rows directly in that table. So in this case, we wouldn't need a new model to reference the join table. We would only sort of need to go through it. And so in that case, you would sort of mark up in the two models that an assembly has and belongs to many parts, and a part has and belongs to many assemblies. And then you could go to any assembly object and go to dot parts and see all the parts that are associated with a particular assembly, or you could go to any part object and go to dot assemblies and see all of the assemblies that that part is part of. So we're going to mirror more closely this one up here. We have a similar relationship in our system. We have students and teachers. They could have appointments as well, something like office hours. And so we'll sort of recreate what they've done here by creating an appointment model that will reference both a teacher and a student, and there'll be an appointment date of type date time in there. So I will go to my command prompt here. I'll open up another bash, and I can start by saying, Rails, generate a new model for me. Oops, a model for me. Specifically, I want an appointment. And the appointment references a teacher. And the appointment references a student. And then the appointment has an appointment date. Appointment underscore date. And it's going to be of type date time. So I just sort of scrolled over 2 lines there. So that's appointment date with the AP starting on this line and the rest of it finishing off on the next line. So when I hit enter here, I'll get that new model of type appointment, and I'll get a migration that's going to create this appointments table for me. And so I'll hit enter. And while that's doing its thing, if we look here in the example, the way the associations get set up in the various models, the appointment has 2 foreign keys. So it belongs to 2 different things. An appointment belongs to a physician and it belongs to a patient. We'll model that in ours in a similar way. And then on either side of the join, both sides have many appointments. A physician can have many appointments because there can be many rows in the appointments table that point to a particular physician ID. And a patient can have many appointments. And then they can also have an association to each other through the appointments. So a physician has can have appointments with many different patients. So we should be able to go to a physician object and go dot patients and see any patient that that physician has ever had an appointment with. And vice versa, for a patient, we should be able to go to a patient object and go to dot physicians and see however many physicians that patient has ever had an appointment with. And that is done by adding the has many through. So here we say that a physician has many patients. It doesn't have them directly, it has them through the other association that is already defined, which is appointments. Same thing goes for patient. So we're going to go and define that in ours. We have to run the migration though. The migration is what's going to actually create our appointments table, giving it the 2 foreign keys and the appointment date. So I will do that. I'll do a Rails DB migrate. There we are. And then I'll just save this to Git. I'll say added appointments join table with a model. And I'll open up all 3 related models now. So we have teacher, student, and appointment. The generator, because it made the appointment model for us and it knew about the relationship, it's already put the belongs to in there. So an appointment belongs to a teacher, an appointment belongs to a student. That's already generated for us. That's great. It hasn't, though, filled out the other sides over here. So a teacher not only belongs to a house, but has many appointments. And a teacher not only has many appointments, but through appointments can have many students that they've had appointments with. Like that. So this will give us the ability to do dot appointments on a teacher object or dot students on a teacher object. Same thing goes on the student side of thing. We're going to add the same to has many, slightly different in that the student will has many teachers. So that'll happen over on the student model. Has many appointments, has many teachers through appointments. And then it's at this point we might just want to test out these series of relationships. So if I go to my console here and I run the Rails console, it gets us to our development environment, and I can go and get a single student and a single teacher and try to make an appointment between the two of them. And so I will save in a variable called s a student. I'll just find the first student in the system. It's Walden. And then I will get a teacher and I'll assign it to a variable t. I'll just get the last teacher in the system, and it's Bob. And so to create an appointment, I will create a variable called a, and I'll say appointment.create. The student will be the s variable that we just fetched. The teacher will be the t variable. So this is Walden and Bob. And then we need some kind of appointment date. Appointment date. And then for this, let's see, date time dot now, is that a thing? I think it might be. Let's just hit enter and see if that is a thing. It is. Okay, so this is the command that I just ran. Created an appointment. I had to specify two other objects. I needed to provide the student object and the teacher object. That put the two foreign keys into the appointment. So the teacher ID and the student ID foreign keys were populated by way of those two different objects. And then the appointment date, I just set it to right now, so it'll have the same value as the created at and updated at. And now, with an appointment object like this one that we called A, we should be able to go to its associated teacher and ask for that teacher's name. There's Bob. We should be able to go to the associated student and ask for that student's name. There's Walden. And we could also do things like we could go to Walden, who is our student, and ask for all of the appointments that Walden has. It'll only be one, but we'll see it. There's the appointment right there. But we can also check out all the teachers Walden's ever had an appointment with, and it'll just be one, and it'll be Bob. There's Bob. So that means things are working. We can start an appointment and we can see the two related objects, or we can start on either side of the relationship and sort of tunnel through to the others. And so what that means is we can now update our database script, the seed script, to generate a number of appointments. So here I will just say added as many through associations to the student and teacher models. So we already have a script here, which is sort of for a certain number of houses. It is trying to generate, or it is generating, a certain number of students and a certain number of teachers. I'm going to increase the number of teachers just because I want to create a bunch of appointments. So I've got 5 houses being created. So that'll give me at minimum 10 teachers, but at maximum 15. Maybe I'll be able to create more. Let's see if I can go to 3 to 4. I'm just going to try running that on its own before adding anything else. So I'll do a Rails DVC here. Foreign key constraint. Where is that having a problem? That's seeds line 3. Oh. And so now, before I can go and destroy all the students, I'll have to go and destroy all of the appointments first. Otherwise, there could be foreign keys in the appointments that could end up like orphan foreign keys. So before I can even run this, I'm going to have to go to like appointment dot destroy all. And just because it's worth noting how I was able to know what line that was on, like the way we read these error messages when they pop up in Rails, especially at the seed script. The line numbers and files that are at the bottom are typically the ones that are least important to us in the stack trace, and if you go up, the ones at the top are usually more related to code that we actually wrote. So the top line there pointed me to the fact that it was the seed script's line 3 that was the problem. So I can try running that again. It should now destroy all of the records in the database and then try to regenerate them. And there we are. So we can generate 63 students, 16 teachers across 5 houses. Awesome. We're going to be generating appointments, so I'm going to add a similar line at the bottom here to tell us how many appointments were generated. And there's a bunch of different ways we could generate fake appointments. We could, one at a time, pick a random teacher, and then pick a random student, and then make an appointment between them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a collection of teachers. I'm going to loop over those teachers, and then for each teacher, I'm going to find a random number of students and create appointments between them. So I will do something like this. I will say teachers with appointments equals, and I'll do teacher.all dot sample 10. I think that'll give me 10 teachers. And then I can say teachers with appointments dot each do teacher. So find 10 teachers, loop over those teachers. The sample is just going to find a random 10 amongst all of them. Once we finish doing this, we'll look at the fact that this is probably not the most efficient way to find 10 random entries, but it'll do us for now. Oh, and that needs to be teacher, not student here. And then students, I can go to the student collection.all, and maybe I get like 4 different students. And now I can loop over those students, and for each student create an appointment with this teacher. So now I can go to appointment.create, and the student in question is going to be the student variable that I just am looping through. The teacher in question will be the teacher that I'm currently at within my loop. And then the appointment date is going to be something different. I'm going to space this out onto a few lines just to make it a little bit more readable. The appointment date, we can do something with Faker here. So Faker is going to give us the ability to pick some kind of date in the future. If I go to my Faker Jam docs like this, there is a date time one. I can go to time. Random time in the future up to a maximum of n days. So like time.forward, and we pick a certain number of days. Let's see if how that works here. So here at the command at my Rails prompt, I'll try interacting with Faker time.forward, where days is, I'll say 50, and the period is in the morning. So that picked, yeah, a day in the third month, 27. Yeah, it looks like it's doing the right thing. It's always picking sometime in the future within the next 50 days, and then a time in the morning. So that's what I'll do inside of my seed script as well. So I'll go Faker time forward. I'll pick 50 days, and then I'll say the period is in the morning. And that should generate 40 different appointments for me, because I have 10 teachers, and then for each teacher I'm picking 4 students, and so all in all I would get 40 appointments across those teachers and students. And so I will try running the seed script now. Try to keep the code up there as well. So I'll do a Rails DB seed. Uh-oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, I just didn't write the word days in there. Days. Let's try running that again. It worked, but what I did was deprecated, which was leaving off the days. Better. So now when I run my script, I get 40 different appointments. I'll pause for a second here. Well, now that we have appointments, I can go make use of them. I can go try to use them inside of my application. So, for example, on the teacher's show page, I could list all the students that that teacher has appointments with and when. Same thing goes on the students page. I can also do the same. And so I'll save this here, generating fake appointments in the seed script. And then I can head over to both the student and the teacher's show pages. And on the teacher's show page, for example, right now it's just showing the teacher's name and the house that that teacher belongs to. I can also put in an H3 that says appointments. And I can put an if statement here at teacher.appointments.empty question mark. So if there are no appointments for this particular teacher, I can say no appointments for teacher.name. Otherwise, I can just list them out as like an unordered list, I guess. Teacher dot appointments dot each due. Call it an app. And then inside of an LI, I can go and generate those appointments. Appointment with app.student.name, right? Because each appointment has a student associated with it. And then on, and then I can go to app.appointment date. Period. So if there's no appointments, we'll say so. I guess I'm missing a period there. And if there are appointments, I'll just loop through them and display all of the appointments. So I'll come back to my code. I just want to make sure that it's actually working. So here's a teacher. Uh-oh, something blew up. Oh, it's because I've reseeded my database since. Teachers. No appointments for that teacher. Who has theirs one with some appointments? And so there's a teacher that has appointments. Specifically, they have 4. They're each with a particular student. I can make the student's name a link. Like so. And then I'll just space things out a little bit nicer for readability. So this is where that link is being generated now. So there might be a nicer way to format that date. But for now, we'll leave it as it is. And we can put like a nearly identical thing into the students, but I will just do a slightly different thing just to show us working with the relationship a little bit differently. So in this case, we're going to the teacher's appointments. What I'll do on the other side of the relationship for the students is I'll go directly from the student to the collection of teachers that they have appointments with. And so if I go back over to here, which is the student show page, I can do that. So here is the student, and I can say H3 appointments. And then I'll do a slightly different if statement. I'll say if the student teachers is empty, that means the student has never been scheduled for any appointments with any teachers. Paragraph, this student, or I can say student name has never had an appointment with a teacher. Close that up. Otherwise, I can list the teachers. So otherwise, I could say something like, here are the teachers, student.name has appointments with. And then I can just loop through them directly. So instead of going to the appointments, I'm just going to the teachers. And so I will say student.teachers.each new teacher. And then I can drop down an li, and I can link to the teacher. Link to teacher name, teacher, and then an li. Oh, almost an li. So it doesn't provide as much information because I'm not actually saying when the appointment is, but I just wanted to show the two different ways of working with that relationship. In one sense, we can go to one side of the two endpoints, and we can go to the join table itself, and we can loop over all the appointments if they exist. Or we can go directly traversing the appointments right through to the other side. So we can get from a single student to all the teachers they've had appointments with, or vice versa. So if I go to a particular student here, we can see that Bill Weasley has had or has appointments with these two teachers. And if we went through to one of those teachers, we'd see Bill there as well. And there's probably some students that don't have appointments with anyone, like this one. Oh, and there's a little bit of a typo I've got in there. That's this right here. So yeah, this is on the student side of things, just looping through the teachers. That is by way of the has many through relationship. But when we were working with the teachers, that was just working with the has many relationship. Does anyone need to see either of these files? This is the student one right here. The teacher one is similar but slightly different. So I will save that stuff to version control. I'll just say something along the lines of displaying appointment information on the teacher and student show pages. So we're almost done, but one thing that we could revisit in the seed script here is the fact that we're doing this teacher.all.sample and this student.all.sample. It's not a very efficient way to get a random number of rows from the database, because what has to happen here with Active Record is we first have to get every single row, and then we build up a Ruby collection of all of those rows as teacher objects, and then we find 10 out of that collection. So it's a bit wasteful, right? If we had hundreds of thousands of rows in our database table, we'd have to fetch hundreds of thousands of rows, we'd have to create hundreds of thousands of teachers objects, only to throw most of them away. So it'd be nice to be able to do something else. It would be nice to be able to do something like teacher dot like random collection and pass in 10. Now that random collection doesn't exist, but we can make it exist. And so this is something we haven't done before, which is sort of adding code to a model to add new class level methods to it. So this is the class level method. It's a method that's being called directly on the teacher model. And so I can go to the teacher model and I can implement this random collection method. So here's my teacher model. I can say define. It's a class level method, so it's a self dot random collection. And initially I can just mirror the not very efficient way we did it. So like your size of collection is going to be the name of the parameter, and then we could go to like self.all.sample size of collection. So it doesn't change anything. It just moves sort of the not very efficient way of doing things into the model. I'll close some of these other tabs here so that now here we're getting 10 random teachers. That 10 is happening here. The reason I just do it by just moving the old thing there is I just don't like to make major changes to my code at any given time. So I'll make a little change, moving something off to another location, and then I'll change it again after I test it. So I'll run this to make sure it still works as expected. I should still be generating 40 appointments at the end of the day. There we are. But how do we get it so that we don't have to actually get all of them just to get a collection, a smaller collection of them? Well, what we can do is we can use offset. So we can move a random offset within the database. So say there was 100 teachers, we need 10 of them. If we move randomly to like position 32, we can get the 10 teachers from there. And so what we want to do is we want to get some kind of offset. And the offset can be like a random number from 0 to the, let's see, the count minus the size of the collection. And it says like I don't have to explicitly call self, so that's fine. I'll do that. I do the minus the size of the collection because I wouldn't want to go too far. If I have 100 records in my collection and my offset was like 190, or my offset was 95, then I could no longer get 10 random. If my size was 10, it wouldn't be possible. So now I'm just going to do an offset from all the way up to, but don't go too close to the end because we want a little bit of a buffer to get the size of the collection. Then we can do a self.limit and a self.offset. So the offset, we're going to use that offset that we generated up here, and the limit is going to be the size of the collection. And I guess we don't need the self. To make this more readable, maybe I'll say random offset. So if we had 100 teachers in the database and we wanted 10 of them, we can now pick a random number from 0 to 90, and then offset by that amount and grab the next 10 records. That is much more efficient. Even if I had hundreds of thousands of rows, it's only ever going to get 10 of them, or whatever the size I'm requesting. And so if I run that seed script, which again should still work, always getting me the right number. There we are. I don't even think I need the 0 dot. I think I can get away with it like that. Yeah. What's up? Count is the actual size of the database. So we're in a class level method. So what we're really doing is we're calling like self.count. So in our case, it's equivalent to being like teacher.count. And so that's the size of the overarching size of how many rows are in the table. But that's worth, like, anytime you look at someone else's code and it doesn't make sense, it means that I didn't write my code clear enough. So I should have like a number of rows available, and that can be self.count. And then I can use that number of rows available to make it maybe a little bit more readable. Maybe I'll put self back in there. Rubelkopf tells me that the self isn't really required, but I think it does make it a little bit more clear as that we're calling it on teacher here in this case. And again, this should still work as expected. So that solved the problem, but it only solved it for teacher. And I also wanted to get a random number for the students. And so I could go and I could copy and paste this whole method over into student, right? I could go grab, there's 5 lines of code there. So I could go to the student, I could put those 5 lines of code in there. And then I could, in my seed script, say like random collection 4. And it'll still run as expected. The problem is that I've got like major duplication inside of my code now. I have this same method implemented twice, which goes against the dry principle, which is don't repeat yourself, right? You don't want to have the same bit of business knowledge 2 places in your application, because if it needs to change, now you have to change it twice. Thankfully, in Rails, every model that we work with inherits from something called application record. So student inherits from application record, teacher inherits from application record. An application record is just sitting right there in the same folder, and it's inheriting from active record base, which is where our ORM actually comes from. So this application record is where we can put stuff that's common to all models. And so we can just take these 5 lines of code here, and we can put them into application record, and then we can remove them from everywhere else. So the student doesn't need that method anymore. The teacher doesn't need that method anymore. They're both going to inherit it from here, from application record. It's still a method on self, but now self will be different depending on who we're calling it on. In some cases, self will be teacher. In some cases, self will be student, but it's still going to work in the same way. So I can run my code. And that's handy. It gives me a place where I can put common code. In this case, it's common code that's related to the class. I could also put common code that's related to the individual members of a class. Same thing goes for within any given model. I can make class level methods inside of there, but I can also make instance methods inside of there as well. That might be sort of helpful in maybe formatting some of the data. Here, I'm going to save that. Added to the application record way and a better way to get random rows from the associated table. And although we aren't going to use it, we might also do something like random all on its own. So instead of just getting a whole collection, we might just want one way of getting just a random row, and we could then just make use of random collection to do so. Size 1, and just return the first because it's getting a collection back. So now if we ever need just a single random row and we want to get it in an efficient manner, we can just call random on any given model, on the model class itself, and it'll go and find a random collection of size 1 and give us back the first one of it. We're not going to use that, but it's just another nicety that we might eventually use in our application. Any questions yet on anything that I've done today associated with this many-to-many association? This idea that a teacher and a student are associated by way of appointments. Appointments are associated by way of a foreign key to both of those things, and then we can sort of get through that association to the far side. So from a student to its collection of teachers, or from a teacher to the students that teachers had appointments with. If we don't have anything else there, then we have one more thing that we're going to do today. It's not going to take us the remaining hour. It won't take, it might just take us maybe 15, 20 minutes, which is a slightly different thing. So we're going to sort of leave teachers and students and appointments aside for a little bit, and we're going to build up sort of like a simple CMS so that this website can have pages that are editable by an administrator. And so we'd like there to be the ability to go to, say, like About Us and have an About page, or to go to Contact and have a Contact page, but also those to be editable so that they're not just hard-coded directly in a view, that someone with a correct username and password could go in and change the content of those pages. And so later on in this course, we're going to look at something called Active Admin. And it's a tool that builds like full sort of administrative backends for this very purpose of being able to perform CRUD tasks on models in your database with usernames and passwords that are properly stored in the database and that are salted and hashed and all that kind of good security stuff. We're not going to go all the way there. We're just going to build a very simple system today, and we're going to build it by starting off with scaffolding. And it's going to start with us creating a new model for this data to be stored in the database. So we're going to create a page model, which is going to give us a pages table in the database. And a page is going to have a title and some content, and then a permalink. And the permalink is going to be this thing right here. So instead of retrieving a page by going to something like /pages/2 or /pages/12 and fetching it by ID, we're going to fetch it by like a more human readable term. We're going to have it be like by About Us or by like anything we want. want. And so that has to be stored in the database, and we can retrieve on it. So it's going to be a string. It's going to be called permalink. And then we need a pages controller. It's going to have the standard CRUD actions to sort of allow us to create and read and update and delete pages. We're going to put a password on it so that most of those actions are only for administrators, but we're going to not put a password on a new route that we add to get to those permalinks. And so we're going to end up with our usual 7 RESTful routes. So we're going to have like, there will be a /pages, and there'll be like a pages /ID for displaying individual pages by ID. That one's only going to be for admins. There's going to be like a /pages /ID /edit for bringing up a form, for editing, all of those things. We're not even going to create any of them. We're just going to rely on scaffolding like I did when I first introduced Rails. That'll build up our 7 RESTful routes and the associated code needed for them, and then we just need to add this special static route. And initially I'm going to make it so that it's going to be like /static/ the permalink, and then we'll see that we can remove even the sort of the /static. What happened here? Let's just not yeah, there we are. Okay, so not much more to do here. We need to scaffold up a page, and that will create the model for us. It'll create the controller, all of the views, the migrations, everything we need. So we say Rails G scaffold for a page, where a page has a title, which is a string, and some content, which is text, and a permalink, which is a string. And when I hit enter on that, it's going to create all those variety of things: the routes, the model, the controller, the views, and the migration. So I will hit enter on my scaffolding. That was this command right here. And it went and generated all those things for me. So I'm going to open up some of what it generated for me. It created a pages controller for me, a page model for me, a bunch of page views that I'm going to leave alone. And if I go to the config folder, it also added to my routing. So if I scroll down here, or scroll up maybe, yeah, we get this resources, pages. This is going to generate all 7 RESTful routes. So I can do a Rails DB migrate to get myself a pages table. And because everything else was coded already for me, I should now be able to go to /pages and create a few new pages. So I could say about us or about Hogwarts. This is the content of the about page. Here it is. And the permalink for this will be about_us. It's a little bit dangerous having your users generate permalinks for you because not everyone will be fully aware of like what characters are allowed in URLs versus ones aren't. So you can't have, for example, spaces in a URL. Those will turn into those weird %20s that you sometimes see in URLs. Usually when I'm working with permalinks, there's a gem that I use called friendly ID that does a lot of this for us, but we're going to build this out ourselves, and we're just going to assume that the person building it out knows to use like underscores or dashes in place of spaces. So that's one thing that I've created. And then I'll also make like a contact page. Contact us. Send us your owls. We want owl mail. And I will just put that at contact. So right now those pages are accessible, but by way of their primary keys. So /pages/2 gets us to the contact page. /pages/1 gets us to the about us page. But I want it to be a little bit different. I want to have those permalinks, but I'm going to have to, that's the functionality that I have to build myself. So the CRUD stuff was built for me. I do also want just a quick and dirty authentication. And so for that, I just go to Rails Guides and I go to the Getting Started guide. And I know that in there, there's like a one-liner for basic auth that I can copy and paste out of section 9.1. So if I go to my pages controller and I paste that in here, it's a command for HTTP basic authenticate with, and I can put in a username and a password, and I can make it for like everything. And so admin super secure, and it's secure because the E's are 3s. That makes it very secure, I'm sure. And now I'll have a username and password on my system because of this HTTP basic authenticate with, where I've given it a username and password. Now, of course, this is not the best authentication. We've got a username and password hard coded into our system. When we get later on in this course, we're going to look how we can actually do proper username and passwords where they're in the database and they're salted and hashed and they're not, they're sort of encrypted and all those good kinds of things. But for now, we're just going to do this very simple way of adding a password. And so now any of the pages that have to do with pages can no longer be loaded unless I put the password in. If I put in the wrong username and password, it doesn't let me in. Super secure. Did I put an exclamation mark? Yes. And then I'm in. So that's good. That gives me my admin area. And now in the routing system, I'm going to add a special route. I'm going to say that a GET request to /static, just the word static, and it could be really anything, maybe just would be the word, just the letter P, and then permalink. That'll go to an action that doesn't yet exist, which is the pages permalink action. And I'm going to give this route a name so that I can use it inside of my views, and I give it a name with as, and it's just going to be called permalink. And what that'll give me is a permalink path helper that I can use to make links using the link to command. So this route will match anytime a browser or really any HTTP client sends a GET request and it goes to /p/anything. That'll trigger the permalink method inside of the pages controller, and then the anything that followed the P will end up inside of the params hash, and that we can make use of inside of the pages controller. And it's this one route here that I don't want to be password protected. I want just anybody to be able to get there. So I have to go to the end of my HTTP basic and I just say, do that, but do it for all of the routes except for the permalink one. So that's a way of getting rid of it. Maybe we don't even need that. I think that's probably okay. So everything except permalink, and then I need to make that permalink route and its associated view. Permalink code will go here, but we're not going to code it up just yet. I want to make sure that I can actually hit that and display the associated view without being prompted for a password. And so I will go to the pages and I will create a new file, and it will be permalink. It's going to be named after the action .html.erb. And that's because unless we explicitly redirect, what happens at the end of any given action is that the associated view gets loaded up. And then here I'll just say it worked. And so we should be able to go to /p/anything. Nothing will happen here, but it'll then load up this, and we should see it worked. So I should be able to go to /p/anything at all, and I see it worked. So that's good. And now all we need to do is just make sure that we load up the right page. So I'm going to say page. I'm going to go to the page model. I'm going to find by a permalink. And I know that because of my routing system, I've got a placeholder called :permalink. I can just get that from my params hash. And once I have that object available to me, then I can go over here and I can display it. So I can say h2 page title, maybe inside of like an article tag, I put out the page content, and then down below I could say last updated, and I can output the page updated at. Because I hate it when there's stuff on the internet and I can't tell when it was last updated. There's nothing worse than a blog post that has no date on it. Because then I don't know if it's too old to trust. So that should find it. I need to actually find a route that exists about us. Uh-oh. This happens sometimes. It may happen to you as well. There seems to be a little bit of a bug in the Rails server, in that the Rails server is never supposed to cache anything. It's supposed to, as we make changes, always have those changes reflected live on the server. But that's not happening right now. I've asked for /p/about us, and it's still just saying it worked, even though that's no longer in my view. The only fix for this, if you notice that your server is not updating when it's supposed to, is you have to go and Control-C and rerun the server. It's a bit hokey, but that's the only fix. And now we see our About Hogwarts, and there's the content. If I go to my other permalink, which was just /contact, it's the Contact Us page. But if I go to a page that doesn't, or a permalink that doesn't exist, I get an error. And the reason is that nothing will be found here. The page variable will end up nil. And so when we go here, we'll try to echo out nil.title. Nil doesn't have a title, and so it'll blow up. So we just need a really quick fix here, which is you can do redirects in controllers. And so I could say redirect to, so if someone tries to put in a permalink that doesn't exist, I'm just going to redirect them back to the root path. So I'm going to say redirect to the root path if page is nil. And that redirect, what it does is it does like an HTTP 301 status code, which is how we do redirects on the web. And because we've done a redirect, it's not going to load up the associated view. It's just going to shuffle the user off to the root. And so now if I try to load up something that does not exist, /p/p/ anything, but it should still work for known permalinks. And now I can go and add those to my menu. So if I go to my layouts folder, the application layout, here we're doing things like linking to the root path or linking to the student's path. If I put a route into the system that doesn't exist, I get to see my various routes, and I'll see my permalink one that I made. I have a permalink path helper, and that's because I named my route permalink. And it needs, in order for it to build a link, it needs to know which permalink to go to. And so if I wanted to link to those two pages from the application layout here, I can just say link to about Hogwarts. And here I can use my permalink path, and I can pass in the permalink that is needed. And then I can do the same thing for the contact page. And the permalink was contact. I don't need this final pipe. And so with those two things in place, I can go over here. When I click on that, I get my about page. When I click on that, I get my contact page. That's working as expected. The neat thing about the routing system is I can go here and I can change how this route operates, and I don't have to update any of my views at all, and the whole system will just automatically update for me. So pages that are on the site. So if I make it so that a GET request is /pages that are on the site /permalinks, I go back to my application now, these links now go to /pages that are on the site. I didn't need to update the application layout at all. I just told the routing system that it should be different, and it reflects that up here. And I should even be able to just completely get rid of that and make it so that a GET request to /permalink is a way to get to it. The only thing about that that's a little bit dangerous is if we put this higher up in the application, the routing system routes from the top down, and now none of the other routes will work because everything is going to be matched by this one. So if I tried to go to like /students, it's going to look for a students page, and that students page does not exist, right? Because it's going to say like any placeholder, and it's immediately going to be like, oh well, that's a placeholder, and it'll look for the students page, and then it'll redirect me to the home page. So just knowing that, I have to make it like the lowest priority route. It has to go at the very bottom, so that if none of the other routes match, then anything else that remains can be treated as a permalink. If it doesn't exist, we get redirected to the root. If it does exist, it'll be displayed. So if I put that back, now things will work as expected. And if I need to update any of those pages, I'm still logged in as an administrator. I can go back over here. I could change the permalink. I could change it from about us to about Hogwarts, and I could put like an exclamation up there. And now when I click the link, oh, I have that hard-coded in my, I have it hard-coded in here. So that is a little bit awkward, the idea that I have the ability sort of to break things, in that if the permalink changes and it's hard-coded in my views, that is a problem. The other problem now is in hard-coded in my views is an assumption that there'll always be an about page and a contact page in my database. That's also sort of problematic. That could be fixed by having a seed script that detects whether it's being run in development mode versus production mode. And maybe when you run in production mode, the very first thing you do is you make sure that there is an about page, and you make sure that there is a contact page, and it could just have placeholder text, but you could make sure that it's there. So you could have like a page create title about Hogwarts, where the content is fill this in, and the permalink is about Hogwarts, and then same thing goes for contact us page. Could be fill this in, and the permalink could be contact, and then up here we would just delete all the pages, and that way now we would always be assured that as long as we've run that script, those two pages will exist. They might exist with some generic content in them, at least to begin with, but it wouldn't lead to a broken site. So that's the only, I think, bit of awkwardness that we'd have to fill in, is making sure that those things always existed in the database because they are hard-coded into the view. The other thing we could do here, if we wanted to get fancier, is we could just have a query in maybe the application controller to find all of the pages that are in the pages table, and then loop over them and dynamically generate these links. But I'm not going to do that for today. But that's something that would, again, solve that problem of having them hard-coded in there. You could, just like we added to the application record, there is a application controller that is common to all controllers. And in here, you can load things up that are present on every single page. And so we can make it so that here, it always loads up all of the pages, and then in the layout, we could actually loop through the pages that actually exist. And then we wouldn't have to worry about any of those caveats anymore. So that's all I got for you for today. And so I'm going to stop the video. And if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask them.